The morning Tessa asked him why he was wearing his fancy shirt, Liam Holt almost turned the car around. She was 6 years old, buckled into the back seat with a juice box and a stuffed rabbit named Button, and she said it the way only a 6-year-old can, completely innocent, completely devastating. He glanced in the rearview mirror at her serious little face and laughed despite himself. "It's not fancy," he said. "It's just a regular shirt. It has buttons all the way up. Lots of shirts have buttons." She considered this with the gravity of a small philosopher. "Are you going somewhere important?" He kept his eyes on the road. The sun was just starting to come up over the Chicago skyline, pale and thin, the kind of winter light that doesn't really warm anything. He'd been up since 4. He'd ironed the shirt twice. "Yeah, baby," he said. "Somewhere important." What he didn't say, what he couldn't say to a 6-year-old still clutching a stuffed rabbit, was that it was the 3rd job interview in 4 months. That the savings account had a number in it that made his chest tight when he checked it at night after she went to sleep. That he'd applied to 62 positions in the past year, and this was the one that called back. That he'd almost not applied at all, because the listing said Executive Protection Specialist, and he figured they'd want someone younger, someone with a flashier resume, someone who didn't have to arrange childcare 3 days in advance just to make a morning appointment. He'd arranged it 2 days in advance. Mrs. Kowalczyk next door had a dentist appointment. His backup, his cousin Ray, had a work shift he couldn't move. So Tessa was coming with him. He'd packed her backpack with her coloring book, her crayons, her rabbit, and a granola bar. He'd told her it was an adventure. She had believed him, the way she believed most things he said, with total and uncomplicated trust. That trust was the thing that kept him moving. It had kept him moving for 3 years. Liam had been 38 when his wife, Carla, died. Not dramatically. Not in the way people imagine when they hear the word died attached to a young woman. She went to the hospital for what they thought was a gallbladder issue. It wasn't. The doctors used words he had to look up later on his phone in the hospital parking garage, sitting in the car for 40 minutes because he couldn't make himself go back inside to tell her parents. She was 36. Tessa was 3. He'd carried Tessa in from the car that night, already asleep, and stood in the kitchen for a long time just listening to the refrigerator hum. He'd been a security contractor before. Private sector, corporate clients, executive travel, the occasional international detail. Good money. Long hours, a lot of airports, the kind of job that works when you have a partner at home and stops working when you don't. He'd scaled back. He'd taken a job doing overnight security at a logistics warehouse on the south side, which paid less than half of what he'd been making but had consistent hours. He'd enrolled Tessa in the preschool 2 blocks from Mrs. Kowalczyk's house. He'd learned to cook 8 meals he could rotate through the week. He'd figured it out, the way people figure things out when they have no other option. You don't feel like a hero. You feel like someone who is very tired and is doing the next thing and then the next thing. But the warehouse had been bought out 8 months ago. New ownership, new staffing contracts. The position was eliminated with 30 days' notice and a handshake from an HR coordinator who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. He'd nodded and thanked her. He'd cried in the car on the way home, just once, just for a few minutes, and then he'd wiped his face and gone inside and made Tessa dinner and helped her with her letters worksheet. 62 applications. 1 callback. He found a parking spot 2 blocks from the Alderton Tower and fed the meter more quarters than he wanted to think about. Tessa hopped out and immediately tried to step on every crack in the sidewalk, which she'd recently decided was the actual correct way to walk. He carried her backpack. The cold cut right through his coat. "Is that the building?" She was pointing up at the tower with her whole arm, head tilted back so far her hood fell off. "That's it. It's really tall. It is." "Do you work there?" "Not yet," he said. Then quieter. "Hopefully." The lobby was all marble and security glass, the kind of building where even the elevator buttons looked expensive. A woman at the front desk gave him a badge and a slightly puzzled look when he mentioned the interview. He'd expected that. He did not look like the other people in the lobby. He was wearing a button-down and khakis and carrying a child's backpack covered in cartoon frogs. The elevator let them out on the 22nd floor, which turned out to be a large open-plan training space. High ceilings, rubber mats on one side, folding chairs on the other. Tall windows with a view of the city. 11 other men were already there, most of them younger than Liam by at least a decade, most of them wearing clothes that looked like they'd been selected specifically for this occasion. Tactical polos, fitted jackets, the kind of deliberate casualness that is actually very careful. They all looked at Tessa. Tessa looked back at them, unimpressed, and pressed Button the rabbit against her chest. Liam signed in with the woman managing the check-in table, a clipboard in her hand, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She handed him a number, 7, without comment. He was number 7 of 12. He found 2 empty chairs near the back corner and set Tessa up with her coloring book and her crayons and her granola bar and told her very quietly that she needed to be his good partner today. She nodded with tremendous seriousness. She took being a partner very seriously. The other candidates had been watching this arrangement with varying degrees of curiosity. Some pretended not to. Others didn't bother. The man one chair over, blonde, mid-20s, the thick-necked build of someone who spent a significant portion of his life in a weight room, did not pretend at all. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and made a sound that was not quite a laugh, more like a comment that hadn't decided to become words yet. Liam opened the orientation packet they'd been handed at check-in and started reading. "You bring your kid to a job interview." The blonde man said it like he was reading it off a sign, stating a fact for the record. There was someone beside him, darker-haired, a similar build, who smiled at his boots. "I did," Liam said. He did not look up from the packet. "That's something." "It is." A short silence. The blonde man was not done. "No offense," he said, with the tone of someone who was not concerned about giving offense, "but what exactly are you applying for? Because this is an executive protection role." "This isn't. I don't know what this is, exactly. Building security? Community watch?" The dark-haired man beside him snorted. Liam turned a page in the packet. "Executive protection," he said. "Right." The blonde man's expression shifted into something more generous, more performatively patient. "And your last gig was what? School crossing guard?" A few of the other candidates were listening now. Not all of them, but enough. Liam could feel it, that particular quality of attention in a room when people are watching something that might become a story. He looked up then, directly at the blonde man. Not with anger. Anger would have been too much effort, but with the flat, clear-eyed calm of someone who has been awake since 4 in the morning and ironed a shirt twice, and driven across a city with his daughter in the back seat, and fed a meter more quarters than he wanted to count, and who is not going to have this moment taken from him by someone who has never done any of those things. "I was a senior contractor for Meridian Group for 7 years," Liam said. "Before that, 4 years Army, military police, 2 tours. He held the man's gaze for exactly as long as it took for the man to look away. Then he went back to his packet. "You?" The blonde man didn't answer. Tessa chose this moment to ask loudly if she could have another granola bar. "You already ate it," Liam said without looking up. "Oh." She went back to her coloring. The rabbit watched the room. The session coordinator appeared a few minutes later, a man named Caldwell, silver-haired and precise, who ran through the format with the efficiency of someone who'd done it many times. Written assessment, situational response exercises, physical evaluation, final interviews with the client's director of security. They'd be called in pairs. Numbers would determine the order. The written assessment took 40 minutes. Liam finished in 30 and spent the remaining 10 reviewing his answers. The man 2 seats down finished early too and spent his extra time glancing at Liam's paper in a way that was not very subtle. The situational exercises came next. Caldwell described scenarios, a crowd event with an unknown threat, a vehicle approach, a principal who had ignored a direct security recommendation, and asked each candidate to walk through their response out loud. Most of the younger men talked about physical intervention. Some talked about communication. One described a protocol he'd clearly memorized from a textbook, technically correct and utterly lifeless. When it was Liam's turn, he talked about the moments before the crisis, the reading of the room. The things you notice that you can't fully explain yet, the way a certain kind of quiet can mean more than noise. He talked about the time he'd been on detail in Jakarta and had moved a principal out of a restaurant 40 seconds before a gas main failed 3 blocks away, and how he'd known to move not because of anything he could point to, but because something in the air pressure had changed, and the waitstaff were all looking at the kitchen. Caldwell wrote something down. The blonde man, his name, Liam had gathered, was Strickland, rolled his neck and said under his breath, 40 seconds and a gas main, sure. Liam didn't respond. Tessa had gotten bored with her coloring book and was now having a quiet, very earnest conversation with Button about the view out the window. She'd identified what she believed was a cloud that looked like a horse. The physical evaluation was held in sections. Grip strength, reaction time, the obstacle circuit. Then Caldwell announced the final component, a live demonstration, 2 candidates at a time, standard controlled contact, no strikes to the face, tap out respected. More about assessment than competition. He said it pleasantly, the way you say things that you know are going to sort people. Numbers were drawn. Liam drew first. His partner was Strickland. The other candidates arranged themselves along the edges of the mats. Strickland rolled his shoulders and stepped forward with the easy confidence of a man who has been the biggest person in most rooms for most of his life. He was 3 inches taller than Liam and outweighed him by what Liam estimated was 45 pounds, maybe 50. He moved well. He wasn't just big. He was coordinated, balanced. He'd done this before. He was also, Liam noticed, already performing. The relaxed expression, the unhurried way he stepped onto the mat, the small smile at the watching candidates. He wasn't just trying to win the exercise. He was trying to be watched winning it. That distinction mattered. Caldwell reviewed the parameters. Both men acknowledged. They took their positions. Someone near the wall said quietly, "This is going to be short." They were right. It was short. It took Liam 11 seconds. He did not do anything dramatic. There was no moment of movie-style hesitation, no speech, no loaded look. He simply moved, precisely and without announcement, and used the one thing Strickland's size and confidence and performance had temporarily made invisible to him. The fact that he'd been watching Liam for an hour and a half and had already decided he knew what to expect. Strickland was on the mat before he understood what had happened. He tapped out almost immediately, the proper response, the trained response, and lay there for a moment staring at the ceiling with an expression Liam recognized. Not anger, more like recalculation. The room was very quiet. Tessa from the corner said, "Daddy, did you win?" He heard a few of the other candidates laugh, not unkindly this time. The tension in the room dissolved like something that had been held too tight and was finally let go. "Working on it," Liam said. He offered on Strickland a hand up. Strickland took it without ceremony. "Good move," Strickland said. His voice was different now, something younger in it, more honest. "I didn't see it. You weren't supposed to," Liam said. They stepped off the mat. Caldwell made more notes. The next pair was called. Liam went back to his chair. Tessa had resumed her conversation with Button. He sat down and found that his hands, which had been completely steady on the mat, were shaking very slightly now. They always did, after. Not from fear. From the release of something he'd been holding tightly. He picked up her coloring book and looked at her picture. She'd been drawing a house with a lot of windows and a large orange tree out front. He didn't know where the orange tree came from. They had never had a yard with an orange tree, but it was very detailed. She had given the tree individual oranges, each one a careful circle. "This is really good, Tess," he said. She leaned over to look at her own work, critically, the way she looked at most of her work. "The tree is a little too big," she said. "I think the tree is perfect." She considered this. "Okay," she said, and went back to coloring. The final interviews were held individually, one at a time, behind a closed door at the far end of the space. Liam waited. He watched the other candidates come and go. Some came out looking satisfied. Some came out looking like they'd answered a question wrong and couldn't quite identify which one. When it was his turn, he settled Tessa with a fresh section of her coloring book and 3 specific crayons, her system, not his, and told her he'd be back in 15 minutes. "Promise?" she said. "Promise Button will watch the time? Good. Button has a good sense of time." She nodded gravely. He straightened his collar and went. The room was a standard conference setup, the kind of anonymous space that could have been any company in any city. 3 people at one side of the table. A man about Liam's age with a deliberate, organized quality to how he'd arranged his notes. A younger woman with a tablet who Liam identified as taking detail notes, and a third person who Liam had not expected. Victor Alderton was in his early 70s, silver-haired, with the upright posture of someone who had either served or grown up in a household where slouching was not permitted. Liam recognized him from the company materials he'd reviewed before the interview. He was the founder of Alderton Industries, and as of 8 months ago, its reinstated CEO after a governance dispute had briefly removed him from his own company. He was not supposed to be at the session. His name had not appeared on any of the materials. He was watching Liam with an expression of mild but genuine curiosity. The man with the organized notes, Reed, his name was, Director of Security, went through the questions methodically. Experience, specific protocols, how Liam had handled a principal who'd made an impulsive decision mid-debate, what Liam would do if he identified a threat that the client did not believe was real, his approach to working within a team versus point responsibility. Liam answered the questions the way he had always answered them, directly, without embellishment, with specific examples from specific situations. He did not try to be impressive. He tried to be clear. In his experience, clarity was more impressive than most people realized. Near the end, Victor Alderton leaned forward. "The girl outside," he said. "Is that your daughter?" "Yes, sir." "How old?" "6. Alderton nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're not so much processing new information as confirming something they already believed. "She yours alone?" "Yes, sir." "Since when?" 3 years. Another slow nod. "And you brought her today." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't a criticism either. His voice had a quality Liam couldn't quite read. Not quite neutrality, not quite warmth. "My childcare arrangement fell through," Liam said. I'd already accepted the interview. So you came anyway? Yes, sir. Alderton was quiet for a moment. Reed made a brief note on his paper. The woman with the tablet glanced up, then back down. I had a situation, Alderton said, at a slightly different pace. About 4 years ago, my board decided I was no longer suited to lead the company I'd built, wanted me out. There was a very organized and very sophisticated pressure campaign, and most of my inner circle folded, one by one, people I'd trusted for 20 years. He looked at Liam steadily. I spent 8 months being told I was finished. Most people believed it. I read about that, Liam said. What did you read? That you came back? Something in Alderton's face shifted very slightly at the edges. Not quite a smile, more like the recognition of a fair answer. The man on the mat, Alderton said. He said something to you afterward. He did. What did he say? Liam thought about whether to simplify it. He decided not to. He said he didn't see the move coming. I told him he wasn't supposed to. Alderton looked at him for a long moment. That's the job, Alderton said quietly. That's exactly the job. He sat back. He glanced at Reed, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I'm going to ask you one more question, Alderton said, and I want an honest answer, not a correct one. Okay, why this job specifically? There are other executive protection positions, corporate security, private firms. You have the credentials. Why here? Liam thought about this. He thought about the savings account with the number in it that made his chest tight. He thought about Tessa, out there in the chair with Button and the orange tree drawing, waiting. He thought about what it would mean to have work again, real work, work that matched who he actually was, rather than a version of himself he'd been temporarily compressed into. He thought about Carla, and how she had always believed that being honest was more useful than being strategic, even when it didn't feel that way. Because it's the work I know how to do, he said. Not in a way that means I learned it. In a way that means it's what I'm built for. And I've spent 3 years doing everything but this, and it's made me a decent cook and a very good bedtime story reader, but I'm not doing anyone any favors by pretending I'm something other than what I am. He paused. My daughter needs stability. This position offers that. I need work that I can do completely. This is that work. Alderton let the silence sit for a moment. Then he stood. It surprised everyone in the room. Reed half rose from his chair, uncertain. Alderton extended his hand across the table. Mr. Holt, he said. Liam stood and shook it. We'll be in touch through Reed before end of day, Alderton said. I won't keep you from your daughter. He said it without irony. He said it like a man who understood the sentence he was saying. Out in the main room, Tessa had fallen asleep in the chair. This was not surprising. It was past her nap time, and she had, in her estimation, had a very big morning. Button was wedged under one arm. The coloring book had slid halfway off the chair, and her crayons were lined up along the edge of the seat with a precision that suggested she'd arranged them carefully before going under. Liam stood there for a moment just looking at her. He didn't know, yet, what Reed would say when he called. He didn't know how this would go. He'd been surprised before, in the bad direction, and he'd learned not to let hope get too far ahead of evidence. But he had done what he came to do. He had walked into a room where every signal said he didn't belong, and he had simply been what he was, and let that be enough. And something in that felt cleaner than anything he'd managed in a long time. He gently retrieved the coloring book from the edge of the chair and put it in the backpack. He capped the crayons one by one and put them away. He put the backpack on. Then he eased Tessa up into his arms, carefully, the way he'd learned to move her without waking her. And she made a small sound and tucked her face against the side of his neck and did not wake up. He said a quiet goodbye to Caldwell on the way to the elevator. He didn't look back at the rest of the room. In the elevator going down, Tessa stirred. Did you win, Daddy? She murmured, still half in sleep. The important thing. He pressed the lobby button. I think so, he said. Maybe. We'll find out. She settled back against him, satisfied with this. Button dangled from her fist. He stepped out into the lobby through the glass doors, back into the thin winter light. 2 blocks to the car. More quarters for the meter than he'd wanted to spend. A juice box in the bag for when she woke up properly. He'd promised himself a coffee after from the place on Wacker that cost too much, as a small private acknowledgement that he'd shown up. He walked. She slept. At 2:47 that afternoon, Reed called. The position was his, starting the following Monday. The number he gave was better than the listing had suggested. Liam was in the kitchen when the call came in, Tessa at the table behind him drawing another orange tree, this one with slightly better proportions. He thanked Reed. He confirmed Monday. He set the phone down on the counter. He stood there for a moment with his hands flat on the cool surface of the counter, breathing. Daddy? Tessa said. Are you okay? He turned around. She was looking at him over the top of her coloring book with those dark eyes that were Carla's eyes, that would always be Carla's eyes, serious and watchful and full of a love she didn't have the words for yet. Yeah, baby, he said. I'm okay. She looked at him for another second with the particular intensity of a child who is checking whether she is being told the truth. Then, apparently satisfied, she went back to her tree. He sat down at the table beside her. She slid the coloring book toward him slightly, a wordless offering, and he picked up a green crayon and started on the grass beneath the tree, and neither of them said anything for a while, and it was the best part of the whole day.